So first of all, I saw the questions that Louise sent me your questions yesterday afternoon, so I actually added some things to this because there's the I've worked on the last two. Well, they were the first two editions of the Biennial of Americas, which took place in Denver over the last few years, and there are some things that are really part of the architecture platform for that biennial that I curated, and then there are other related things that maybe aren't strictly architecture that, but they're related either thematically or they set up something that became sort of like my architecture, part of our architectural practice in my office or whatever. So, and some of those things were mentioned in your questions, so I thought I would just show a few things so everybody's on the same page. So, starting with 2010, which was the first biennial of the Americas, I personally was not very heavily involved in the biennial itself, but I co-curated an exhibition with Adam Werner, who's the director of the MCA Denver, Museum of Contemporary Art in Denver. We co-curated an exhibition called Energy Effects, which was about how energy is used in the arts and also in science to a certain extent, and how that's different from our goal was to present that as a different view of energy than the popular discourse on conservation and to enrich the kind of public conversation around energy through this exhibition. So there were a handful of installations that were commissioned specifically for the exhibition. This is one of them. If any of you saw Ciro Natle lecture last year, you've seen this installation called Cumulus, which is it's crocheted, and it's a catenary surface that is subdivided into smaller catenary surfaces that are then subdivided into smaller catenary surfaces, over and over again. And the idea was that the catenary surface, which is a kind of efficient structure, like the minimum material to create something which has, a kind of a strong structural performance, becomes totally redundant and heavy, and the structural effects translate to visual and material effects. So this hung in the atrium of this is the MCA Denver. And he developed this incredible notation system that he used to communicate to some women who, this huge, this factory basically of women in Buenos Aires who fabricated it, and they had no idea what a catenary surface was or anything like that. So he had to communicate to them like how do they increase the number of stitches in some portions of it to create more or less folds, and basically this was the effect. There's a skylight above it, so that's why it looks like it's glowing. This is another piece by an artist named Orly Ganger that was also commissioned for this. This is an installation by Jim Sanborn, who is a very odd character and maybe not really well-known character in the art world. He does one project about every 3 or 4 years, and they are incredible things. Like he's most famous for a sculpture that's outside CIA headquarters that is an inscription, and 3 different inscriptions. They're all coded differently, and he worked with an ex-CIA cryptographer to do this, and the third of the first 2, it took years, but the first 2 were eventually cracked. The third one's never been cracked. And so it's like this, there's a kind of like online cult of people who are, kind of like, talking about it and trying to like figure it out together or whatever. This is it's a working replica of the first particle accelerator built at the Carnegie Institute. He learned all of the physics about how to build it, and built he himself on this island that he owns in Chesapeake Bay outside Washington, D.C. He built this, and it works. It's you can actually create radioactive material with this thing. So, and it's an amazing piece of I don't know what you call it, technology, machinery. And he's interesting because he says one of the main reasons he does this is because he believes that there are certain moments in history that are so important that it's not enough just to read about them or see a photo. You need to see the thing itself and understand, the artifact carries more weight than the story. story. The project he's working on now, which is the follow-up to this, is a time machine. Then we had a Mexican artist named Gonzalo Labrija. He's from Guadalajara, who did this installation outside the MCA, which is a kind of public art version of this, which is a photo that he did as a work. It's a restored muscle car that they hoisted over this lake in Mexico with a crane and dropped it into the lake and filmed it with a high-speed camera. And so this is just a still. It's the one image right before it went into the water. Yeah, anyway, that's so anyway, so he replicated that as a kind of public sculpture here, with the puddle in the parking lot across the street from the MCA. In the background, you see the MCA is the black building, and the kind of like rusty building to the left is another. They were both designed by David Adje. The one to the left is a town home. But anyway, Gonzalo's, I thought this was a really interesting project because at first it seemed like, purely about the effect, but then it, slowly became, a project about, realized that it was kind of like a classical sculpture, like a fountain and, upright, but, obviously a totally different take on that. So here you can see, like, for example, one of the galleries, or half of one of the galleries had Gonzalo's car, and then it had a photo by Richard Meredith Hardy of the only car that had the sound barrier, the thrust SSC, which created this shockwave that was visible in the desert. The light can kind of hit the dust differently. And so Richard Meredith Hardy was in an ultralight, which is kind of like a personal flying machine, like flying over the scene, taking all these photos. They just happened to catch the light just right, that the shockwave was visible. So there are these photos that, like, in the exhibition, we're sort of looking at sometimes at how, what are some of the byproducts of investing a lot of time and energy in things. Like, for example, in the case of the Richard Meredith Hardy photo on the right, there is this incredible series of photos that came out of this, which was not the intention at the beginning, but now the photos almost have, more value and more of a life than the achievement itself. But even the achievement was like, why do we do these things? Like, why do we try to break the sound barrier in a car? What's the, is there, do we do it because we expect there's going to be some kind of technological advance that's going to come out of it? Do we do it just because it's, like it's there, like Everest, or what's the purpose, and how does art relate to that, and how can we kind of sort of advocate for new views of energy that would that would allow us to get more resources, get more support to do the things that we do in the arts than we do currently. So this is a photo of the Large Hadron Collider in CERN. And this is a great example. When this thing's running, it uses as much energy as the entire city of Geneva. So, and we have no idea, scientists have no idea what we're going to learn from running it. We might learn nothing, but there's this unbelievable amount of money and actual fuel going into it. So that we showed, for example, on vinyl as a huge image at the end of this gallery, along with photos by Anne Hardy on the left. She creates rooms. I don't know if you can quite see it, but it's over here. She builds a room from scratch, takes a photo of it, and then dismantles it. So it never really exists except for the photo. But they look like old places that have sort of strange and sort of eerie, sort of eerie life. This was something that we got from there's a Air and Space Museum, kind of it's not unofficial, but it's very casual. Out on an Air Force base, it's now a residential development called Lowry. And this is the rocket from a Titan, or the engine from a Titan rocket, which was used to go to Saturn. Or this type of engine, that rocket went to Saturn, was the engine, one of the engines they used. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous, especially inside. Really, really amazing thing. And this was in a room where we were looking at scale as a topic. Each gallery had a slightly different topic, and in this case, like in the background you can see that microscope. So on the one hand you have this rocket engine that was built to send a rocket to Saturn to try to kind of like extend our like sort of human perception of the universe on the one hand. On the other hand, in the background you have I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but it's a sculpture by Willard Wiggin. It's microscopic. It's the Statue of Liberty on the head of a pin. Like it's super tiny, and the amount of energy it takes for him to make that really small thing is just it's amazing. I mean, he literally can't breathe while he's working and has to like touch the sculpture and work on it in between heartbeats. So he has to slow his heart rate way down because the heartbeat in his fingers would destroy it. Like it's so small. So just looking at how we they're different. It's very different scales in which we work. There's just two other works in the background that are serious. This was a work by a local artist, Vivian Courtois, who this is a lifelong project she does. Where she makes her own shoes and she wears them until they wear out, and then she makes another pair. And then she writes a kind of biography of each pair, like where they were born, where they went, where they died. And she's got I mean, at the time we did this, she had 150 pairs or something like that, and she adds a few each year. And this was really So this also the wall that they're on right now is monopan, which is a translucent material. The building has a double skin. It has a glass outer skin, and then about 18 inches inside that it has this monopan skin. During the day, the light came through it, so you could see all the holes and everything in the shoes. It was really nice. I should include a photo of that. This is another work by Jim Sanborn, which is a block of dry ice melting, and there's a soundtrack playing. That's sound of ice cracking and moving in the Arctic. This is another one we got from the Air and Space Museum. These are nuclear bombs, two of them, and it's kind of like they're beautiful. Like they're really beautiful, pieces of industrial design, and sort of it brought to light the even like the nuclear arms race was a very aesthetic thing. It's like the whole point of having this was to produce emotion. To produce a kind of like either intimidation or fright on the part of like another country or another government. So it wasn't. I don't even know if they were ever really designed like really to be used as much as they were designed to instill fear in someone else and to kind of produce a reaction out of emotion. So even things that like it was. I think that what this did was to kind of what it suggested, which I think was really good, was that kind of like we can't diminish the aesthetic as it's like a superficial aspect of any work, whether it's an artwork or something else in the world. So anyway, that was 2010. So then, second version in 2013, you can see they really got the biennial concept down because there were 3 years between the first one and the second one. So like, we really really like nailed that. Like that was getting off on the right foot. But so in the second one, I played more of a role in the biennial itself. I was a curator, asked to be a curator for the architecture part of it, and I wanted to show. So I just pulled this off their website just to show the kind of overall organization of the biennial, because I think it's somewhat unusual and did affect how we worked. And so if you either in the subject heading from the left, you see that there's an ideas. They call them platforms, but there's an ideas platform. What that means is they invited people. They had a series of themes like education, energy, and natural resources. They had like a few broad themes, and they invited people to Denver, like really well-known, famous people like Eric Schmidt, the founder of Google, or Arianna Huffington, Tina Brown. Like kind of like well-known people from a variety of sectors, from business, from the press, political figures, and invited them to come to Denver to speak about these topics. And they held, every day was a different topic, and there were clinicas during the day, which were private sessions with, let's say, half a dozen experts on a particular subject, all meeting and going through some questions that they had developed in advance in order to produce some ideas about, where to go on those subjects. Then in the evening, each evening there was a symposium. So maybe there were half a dozen people in a clinica, but there were, I don't know, 4 clinicas, let's say, during the day. Then in the evening, some of the kind of top people from those would all get together on a panel and have what they would call the symposia, which were bigger public presentations in the evening of those subjects, summarizing what they've discussed during the day, and then all of this has been compiled in white papers that are that are made public and that they will use as the basis for the next biennial. So the idea is that they can bring together, like some experts, have them talk first in private, so it's not, they don't have to, kind of like cater to a broad audience. They can be very, very, they can be experts on what they're discussing, really, and talk among themselves as experts, and really try to produce some, new knowledge or new questions, about their field. So, and those took place for a week. Then there was art, which architecture was mostly part of the art platform. That included one exhibition in a building called the McNichols Building, which is kind of usually it's used for some events now. It's generally an empty building that, but it's right in the middle of Civic Center Park, which is kind of the center of downtown, certainly, like in between the state capitol and the city and county building, which is the city government. And so there was that exhibition, which was a biennial exhibition, which was curated by a local artist. Then there were other sort of satellite events and exhibitions at other museums. There was also an exhibition organized by Carson Chan, who's a curator in Berlin, of billboards and other public sort of art. They asked artists from all over the world to design, say, like something for a billboard. It was generally like all out in the open. And then there was the architecture projects, which I'm going to show you here in a second. Culture and public festivals were, I think there were a number of like really large-scale events that were organized that took place, and a lot of the same people worked on some of these things. So you'll see, like, I myself was involved in the architecture part of it. These projects I'm going to show you, but also was asked to design something for one of the events, So there's this crazy thing that happens. You guys want to kind of know the behind-the-scenes stuff, right? Like not just like what you would have seen as a visitor, but like how it all went down and that kind of stuff. Okay, so there's like the kind of crazy thing that happened where they hired somebody well in advance to be the curator for the entire, to be the really like the director of the entire biennial, both the ideas platform and the arts and architecture platform. She had a very good track record, but when she came in and started to work, things were going very slowly. There was not a lot of transparency with what she was doing, and the board for the biennial got pretty frustrated with her and eventually fired her. And this was, I don't know, 7-8 months before the opening and everything, which is like very close. 7-8 months is not a lot of time when you're organizing these kinds of things. So at the time that she was fired, we had been, when I say we, so I worked with, see in the compound, right? I worked with Carson Chan and Gaspar Lebedinsky. You know Gaspar. The three of us had been assembled. We didn't choose one another. We had been assembled as a team. We worked together fine. Although I don't think any of the three of us would have chosen the other two if we had chosen each other's team. I mean, we did actually do perfectly okay, but we actually had gotten the furthest in what we had developed of anything that she had been, this previous director who got fired. Of all the things she had kind of started, all the different parts of the programming that she had begun or initiated, we had gotten by far the farthest in developing ours, and what we had come up with was this concept of draft urbanism, which had a kind of dual meaning. The main sort of interpretation of that theme was that we could do installations that would be urban installations that would test out urban ideas, and maybe even more specifically, solutions to four general problems for Denver, for the city of Denver. We have 4 installations, each of which would address a problem that you see, a kind of typical problem of the city of Denver. And so draft urbanism was sort of like, you know, can some installations be designed to kind of test a solution to this problem? It's not going to be the permanent instantiation of the solution, but it'll be like something that'll give us some feedback as to like how to deal with that in the future as a city. Then there was a sort of second meaning, which is that Denver is a very kind of prolific craft beer, has a prolific craft beer industry. Like like most, has a huge amount of craft beer comes from Colorado. And there's something like almost 100 craft breweries now, in Colorado, and it's a huge part of the culture. So draft, in terms of like a draft beer, was part of it. We thought that was something we would try to take sort of seriously, not just like fun, like, oh, it's great to like drink, it doesn't everybody love the city, but to really look at how beer influenced the way that like economic systems, the neighborhoods, real estate value, the social life of the city, like kind of getting into it at a lot of different levels. So that was the initial topic, and it was so far developed that they decided to adopt this. Once she was gone, they figured, okay, this is a good topic. You guys have gone pretty far with this. We want you to do not just the architecture program, but the whole arts and architecture side of it. Like all of these exhibitions that we're organizing, everything. So mostly Carson ended up taking that on because he's a curator as like professionally. That's his main thing. Like I myself am an architect mostly and dabble in curating, like here and there. When it seems like it's going to be interesting and somebody invites me to, but he really does it more regularly, and he kind of straddles the worlds of art and architecture. So he was better. So we kind of guess what? I think we're happy to let him kind of take on more of the art side, and the two of us focus more on the architecture side of things from then on. So what we did in terms of the architecture is we identified 4 kind of typical problems of the downtown area. And this shows the locations of 4 installations that we commissioned. Starting on the left with Mine Pavilion by Petzl von Ulrichshausen, which I'm going to show you all the projects, but right over there, I'll get into it, but there's like this kind of windy road on the left. This parkway, Spear, was designed as part of a kind of City Beautiful movement effort to make this to beautify the city. And now it's to the west there's a campus, Auraria campus, which has several colleges in it, and to the east is a very like kind of bustling part of downtown. But it really is like a divider now. It's hard to get across it, and people really don't. It becomes like the city really badly for years has wanted to connect the campus with the kind of urban fabric of downtown better, and this road is part of the problem. So we're trying to figure out what do you do about that? How do you make that connection? Skyline Cloud was a project that was in Skyline Park, which is a Lawrence Halpern designed park that crosses 16th Street Mall, which is a pedestrian, about a mile-long pedestrian mall designed by Ian Pei. It's 3 blocks long, Skyline Park, and it's almost always totally abandoned, which is weird because it's like in the center of the city, and there's like so many people and so much going on around it, and so it's just a big question. Like why don't people use this park, and how can it be designed to work better? The third, I'm going to show you is a hotel rehearsal by a guy named Alex Schwader. Excuse me. So Alex is an artist and architect who's getting his PhD at the Bartlett, I think, right now, and he works out of New York. Very interesting guy, and we gave him as a site surface parking lots. There are a bunch of surface parking lots in downtown Denver, and there's a kind of like legal sort of there's some like regulations that basically make it that don't encourage the development of those surface parking lots into into buildings or anything else. So you have this sort of strange landscape of like flat parking, like kind of parking lots, that throughout the downtown. I mean, you can see them in different places, like, in there. And so it's a little bit misleading. The lot that I have noted here is where his project mostly was, but his was about moving around to these different parking lots and how to use them sort of more as a network of sites rather than like just having something in one site. The last one, Mirror Stages by June 14, which is an office Sam Chermieff and Johanna Robrugge, and they were given 16th Street Mall, which is this pedestrian mall that I mentioned, which is kind of like super chaotic, like overstimulating place that's like really commercialized and is not kind of pleasant public space to be in, even though there are tons of people, something like 10,000 people visit it every day. Lots of people work around it, so gave them that as a site. And so, and with each site, we had a particular problem, and we chose these 4 people. We assigned them a site because the nature of their work seemed to suggest that they would, have a strong, kind of sense of what to do with that particular problem in that particular site. And they also were chosen because they're all live and work in the Americas, different parts of the Americas. So that was, that was a consideration as well in the selection process. So I'll try to go through these sort of quickly. So this is the 16th Street Mall. Runs all through here. This is the site that they chose to work with. This is the tallest building in Denver, Republic Plaza, which is an SLM building, and this is actually also a pay building. This Sheridan. Like I mentioned, 16th Street Mall. That makes it look really, really good, but it's actually it's kind of a mess. It's like really. It's not as nice as that makes it seem. Like, and yet these buses go up and down, and the buses are horrible. There are no cars, but the buses like run through. It's kind of a wreck. This was their kind of like their initial scheme. This is what they proposed. I'm going to show you like kind of the proposal, like the early concept drawings, and then I'll show you the installations. Their idea was to create something that was so kind of alien or foreign to the mall that when people they would make these boxes, and the box would be filled with butterflies, and or originally it was birds and then changed to butterflies. But the idea was that it would be such a kind of unusual environment that everybody on the mall, first of all, once you were inside of them, you would kind of like the rest of the mall would drop away, visually at least. It would be much more calm inside, but also that the mall has a lot of different people, like homeless people, like wealthy businessmen, everything in between. So that this would be something that could kind of bring people together in a positive way, in relation to this other kind of really more foreign thing. So here's what they eventually became butterflies, and they're monarch butterflies inside these enclosures. So here are the 4 enclosures that they built. Each one of them is around a different piece of kind of site furniture. This one is around it's a phone booth. This one is around a pair of benches that are facing one another. This one is around a planter, like some flowers. And then this one is around a water fountain. And they kind of took on the proportions roughly of those things. So here are those 4: phone booth, flowers, fountain, and the benches. This one worked much better than I expected it to be honest. Not so much because of the butterflies, is that the enclosures were really beautiful, and the site that they chose, there's strange reflections of light because it's kind of like a lot of the buildings on either side are mirrored, and so you get very interesting light conditions, but also because people loved it. Like people were in these all the time, just it's crazy. Like I didn't know why anybody would stop and like, go inside or, like, just to hang out. It seemed kind of bizarre. Like why would I figure people just go by and they just sit there? But people loved them. There were always people inside them. It was really crazy.
What's the material? Is it fabric?
It's like a soft net. And then at the bottom, there's a chain along the bottom that's heavy that kind of holds it taut, keeps it from blowing the wind. And then the structure is just those four white steel tube that's then anchored into the ground. The structure was really beautiful too. These guys, I mean, they worked for Sinai, so you can kind of tell. And that came through, like their expertise with that really, showed. And there were some odd kind of correspondences with the coincidental correspondences with the surrounding site. The way that they like aligned with the vertically with the towers, for example, structure did, or like in this case, this cube is pretty much the same proportions as this other sort of stone block that the city brings to it, or the scale of the white mesh and the kind of grid of the tower are very, very similar. So this is the second project. So their problem was how do you make it a better transition from downtown. You can't really see it, but it's on this side, and the campus, which is on that side. And we worked with them to develop, I think, for me, this was the best kind of test of an urban idea. I think this is the best project all around, to be honest. But in this case, there have been all kinds of proposals to build bridges and tunnels and do all this, make this kind of circulation infrastructure to make it faster and easier to get across from one side to the other without having to stop for traffic at every point or whatever. And we thought instead it might be interesting to actually occupy the space in the middle. So if you provided some place to go in the middle, so it wasn't just about getting all the way from here to all the way over there as fast as you can, but that if you started to kind of develop actually the territory in between, that might be a better way to deal with it. And I think they really proved that was true, which of course is, for a preservationist, it's hard to swallow because the City Beautiful movement, you're basically undoing what they did during that era. I mean, this road, for example, Spear is named for a famous mayor who made most of those improvements, at that time. And so that's for many people part of the legacy. But this is again just kind of, if you're on the downtown side, just sort of looking across to see what you have to get across to get over to the campus. Oh, sorry. And this is just from below. So this was their initial proposal, and actually what was built in the end was pretty much exactly the same thing, which is this large wood frame structure. It's made out of beetle kill pine wood. There's beetle kills, there's all these trees in the last decade have been killed in the mountains outside Denver by pine beetles. It's kind of devastated the pine forest. It happens every 40, 50 years, but so there's all this wood, that comes from that, so they use that. The building, I grew to really like this project, partially because the building really, first of all, it's anticipating some development that could be there. You can see right across the street, the camp, that's the campus side. They're already building a bunch of stuff right there. So using the median and actually developing the median is not that much of a reach. You're seeing some development on either side. Personally, I like it because it's a relatively simple form. It's just this kind of flat tower that tapers very, very slightly as you go up from from one level to the next. But it references a lot of different identities that this site has had through its history. So here, for example, to the traffic, it looks like a billboard because it's flat to the traffic, and that's what most people know it for now. Or also from the end, you know, looking toward downtown, you see that there are actually even 1 or 2 more images where you see this. It looks like a tower, and so you know the typology, you know, the building typology of the tower is you know is kind of represented in it from an angle where you see other other towers. You know, here again, for example, like it's on the left, but it kind of blends in, you know, with the other towers just to a certain extent. The construction of it is like a lot of mining buildings in the area, and this is one of the places where Denver was first settled. People were panning for gold in Cherry Creek, which is a creek that runs right next to the site, and they set up settlements where people would come and they would live there and they would pan for gold right there, and that was the start of Denver. I mean, the city of Denver was, you know, like where they started those settlements, and so the construction of it, you know, recalls that history. I mentioned it's made out of the beetle kill wood, and then it's weighed down by all these rocks, which are from, you know, like granite from the area. And then on top of that, it was just really an incredible structure. I mean, I've never seen I've personally never seen a structure that big and that light. Like it really felt light. I mean, inside you could, it was pretty powerful. Okay. So that was that one.
Did it have just a typical foundation or what?
No. So this has that was the by far the most difficult part of it. So in this plinth, it's black here. Underneath there are outriggers. So they're like beams basically that are laterally, like this way, you know, like the long way. It's not really, there are not really any issues. The other way, overturning is a problem, right? Because we get pretty stiff winds out there. So I mean, as you do here. So so that was the biggest concern. Was like, you know, this thing blow over basically. So underneath there are these outriggers, you know, these they're kind of like beams that come out, and then those are set on these cribbing, which are, you know, like these. Have you ever seen this on construction sites when they'll put a crane in? They'll make these stacks of timber, like, you know, just whatever wood, where they'll stack, you know, 2 in this direction, 2 in that direction, you know, they go back and forth, and they stack those up, and then they'll put the crane on that, and it just distributes the weight of the crane and whatever it's holding, like, you know, a little more broadly, so it doesn't sink into the ground, because they don't want to have to build a foundation for the crane. Well, sometimes. So that's what that is. So the whole thing is kind of sitting on cribbing, and then all of those rocks on that you see here, for example, which are on the deck, are weighing down like that outrigger so that it can't tip over. That plus the rocks that were on those shells on the inside. But mostly it's these out here. So you could walk around on the decks. There was enough space to walk, you know, right next to the pavilion. But out on the edges, it was just totally covered with the rocks. But so Skyline Cloud is you know, was another project I mentioned. Is in this like Lawrence Halpern designed, you know, sort of 3 blocks of a park that's relatively empty these days. As you can kind of see sort of what that looks like here. Parts of it are like this. They're, you know, the original Halpern design, and they're very stepped and, you know, with a hardscape and some fountains. The part that they chose is an open grass area, and you know, coming from Medellin, these guys, you know, knew that shade is a very sort of like powerful material. That, you know, if you just providing shade, particularly in the summer, it gives people a place to go, and, you know, they thought that by building these shade structures, they could encourage people to use the park a little bit more. So this is their. You can see, like, this is that grassy area. This is their installation down here. There you go. Closer view. This also had to be held down with like those little piles of rocks are on pieces of unistrut that extends out, you know, kind of from the feet. It tends to be hidden in the grass, you don't really see it. But yeah, so here's, you know, this is kind of like right in the middle of downtown. So you know, people did hang out there for sure. You get like some people see some things, but I would say in a way this was probably the least successful of the four. I mean, both in terms of the effect of the, you know, the installation. It seemed kind of small, and you know, it didn't have a presence like the other three did, or certainly not the two that you've seen already. And it also didn't really, turns out, like solve the problem of like kind of getting people. It wasn't like this was like always crowded and there was like tons of people there, you know, eating their lunch in the shade as was hoped. It just kind of, you know, was there. There'd be a few people hanging out, but it didn't really change the use of the park in any meaningful way. And for what it's worth, I also think those guys, Plan B, I think they're better at larger scale projects, and they've done some, you know, a bunch of installations that were smaller, but I think their larger projects tend to be a little bit better. So this is the surface parking lots. This was the surface parking lot that Alex worked in the most. But you can kind of, you know, again, there's just a couple images just to show you, what this is like. And he was proposing a van that had a scissor lift in it, and a hotel room would pop up out of the van. So that these are just, you know, it's kind of like renderings of that. And then here's the real thing. So this is it when it's mostly closed up, and just as it's extending. And it, you know, it's high. It's like 30 feet in the air or something like that. And it was incredible. The thing itself was amazing. Alex built it all himself, except for the inflatable part of it. So that enclosure up top is inflatable. The actual inflatable part he had somebody manufacture. He's done some things in the past, so he had fabricators he'd work with. But it was, you know, fully functional as a hotel room. So the air that was used to inflate it was this was all in summer, keep in mind, so it was air conditioned, so that it was actually cool inside. It didn't get, you know, really hot in that bubble. It's comfortable. One of the things that he kind of used, and one of the reasons, you know, one of the main features of the surface parking lot that he thought he'd want to use is like every one of these by code has a 220 outlet, like an electrical outlet. It's just like has to be there. That's outside. I don't know. Nobody knows why, but so they plugged into that. And it was like it's like free electricity. So it was powered. You know, it had electrical power. It has, you know, a working bathroom in it. It has a I don't think I have video of this, but there's a couch inside that has this, like, there's a button you push, and there's this like mechanism that flips half of it over and turns it into the bed, so you can, you know, hang out in it like as a couch or it is a living room and bedroom in the same room, but you can, you know, kind of switch the furniture to make it one or the other. But it's also, I think, really very interesting, particularly in Denver and in the United States today, because you know, more and more over the last like decade or two, the distinction between the suburbs and the city has become blurred. So you have, you know, in terms of building types, you now have, like, you know, there's a mall right near here, you know, in downtown Denver, but there are also apartment towers being built out in the suburbs. Demographically, there are more ethnic minorities. You know, there's a larger population of them in the suburbs than there's in the city as of 2010. More poverty and more crime now in the suburbs than in the city. So even the term inner city, like, you know, if you like Google Ngram, you guys know this thing where you can like look up the history of the use of a word. So if you put in like inner city, you see that that's tapered off almost to a level before anybody even used that word. So, like, you know, nobody even thinks of it as the quote unquote inner city anymore because of the associations with like crime or whatever. So I think this is a really interesting project because he's really mixing like the iconic forms of transportation that, you know, from those two you know, parts of the city, like the car, the vehicle, and the elevator, and like kind of both combined. And then on top of that, obviously, then there's like, you know, a lot these days in architecture about, you know, surveillance in hotels, and like exhibitionism, like along the High Line, for example, we're starting to see that more, versus view and the changing nature of the hotel room and kind of plasticity of the hotel room is something that he was. So it's it can be like totally open like this, but there are these curtains that you can pull around it for privacy, or leave the roof open. Like this, it's not open, but it's clear, it's transparent. That's in couch configuration, but that thing, like there's flips. There's like a motorized switch. And he drove this thing around, so every opening we had, like he showed up with with this, and then people would go inside it and check it out. He'd bring it, like it would go down, people get in it, they put it back up. It's like, and people loved it. And then after the after the opening week of the biennial, it was around Denver for a couple months. All these projects were up for about 3 months. Mine pavilion stayed up a little bit longer. They were able to keep that up for about 5 or 6 months until the first snow, basically. But then, originally this was going to be a working hotel room that you could rent out for, $300 or $400 a night. They had an agreement with Sage Hospitality, which runs a couple of hotels in the area, but the legal side of it got so unbelievably complicated that eventually they didn't do it. And what they did instead was they put together a package with Tiffany and a couple other companies where you could stay in this for one night for $50,000, but you would also get like a diamond necklace and like all these things. And it was a brilliant move because this was Alex. This had nothing to do with me. It was a brilliant move because nobody ever did it, but the press coverage that they got because of that was incredible. It was like it was like on CNN. It was like everywhere. Like $50,000 a night hotel room. That's like inflatable and pops out of a van. It was like a great story, kind of just like human interest story. So, so they did well with that. I also I organized a conversation at the Clifford Still Museum with Mark Lee and Michael Webb to talk about draft urbanism from 2 other generations of architects. All 4 of the ones that we chose for the installations, these installations were young, like very young for the most part. Mark is a little bit older, not much older, but definitely had, if you guys don't know him, has an established practice in LA. And Michael Webb is one of the founding members of Archigram, and has been around forever. And both of them have done projects that are sort of like small scale projects related to that anticipate larger urban developments. And so it was interesting to talk to each of them about how do small projects like the installations that we organized, maybe how can they anticipate or project like new visions for the city. So the lecture was actually packed. I mean, it was people were packed. Like it was much better response than I expected. It's always anytime you're dealing with avant-garde architecture, it's like pleasant to know that there are people out there who are interested, and there's almost no architects. It was really a crazy mix of people from the art community or just interested people. So here's Michael lecturing on the transportation system at Dulles, and how for him these kind of like mobile rooms, lounges at Dulles, that's what they were initially conceived. It wasn't just like a bus, but it was supposed to be like a lounge, that just moved you from terminal to terminal, and how for him that was it could be a powerful prototype for some new urban life. But he's also chose him because he was a guy in the '60s was looking at things like the spacesuit and realizing that there was a whole new kind of city that could come from that, which is seems like a big leap, but he designed, you guys probably know, the pseudolune and the cushicle, which are combined here to make this this portable habitat that you can take with you and blow up wherever you wanted to stay. This is a prototype that they did for an expo actually. and then, or you could combine them. You know, if two people wanted to share space, they could be connected and start to aggregate. You know, Mark, on the other hand, you know, is looking at, say, like zoning envelopes when they designed a hill house, and how they might use that to determine the form of the house. So, you know, the maximum height can be related to the, you know, it's a maximum height off any point in the topography. So they developed this kind of, you know, abstracted version of the topography of the site, and it just projected up to create the house. So this is the house that they made. You know, from a distance, and you know, kind of that roof, the way it drops off at that weird angle, is because the site is doing the same thing. You kind of see it down below on the lower edge. So they did that. But what's interesting is that then, as a study, they extended that to the whole neighborhood. So it was like, you know, in this case, the zoning regulations are the same. You know, the massing is the same across all the houses, but the differences in subtle differences in the topography would create different houses. Like that would be the variation across these houses. These single-family homes would be, you know, from that. So again, like taking something, sorry, that's wrong way. Taking something that was just one project as a small project and trying to project a new kind of like urban strategy from that was, you know, something they did. And it was a really, really interesting conversation between the two of them. Yeah, we could talk about it later if you want. Right immediately following that, there's an event that I organized with Adam Lerner from the MCA also, which was called Craft Urbanism, which was more on the beer side of the drafters and things like this. You know, craft beer that's where the title comes from. So Denver's a big producer of craft beer. Also, I mean, the Coors breweries in Golden. So it turns out that Denver produces more beer by volume than any other state in the country. And you know, the gazillion statistics about why beer is important to Colorado. I'm going to keep moving, just so we have time to talk. So what we did was organize. We had 4 local craft breweries who set up on, you know, in this area. So one was on the bridge, one was in an alley over here, and 2 were along Cherry Creek over here. So this is right in the middle of downtown. But they were just out. It was like an outdoor temporary beer garden that you know that was set up just for one afternoon. So this is, you know, like in the alley, which is actually really, really nice because it's shady. On the bridge. And this is sort of with the trees sort of along the creek. And there's Gaspar. That was the happiest he was all week by far. He had a good time. Then they also, as part of the public festivals, they asked if, for one of them, which is called Music for Animals, which was this night, it was really incredible. 20,000 people turned out for this event, which included all kinds of things related to all kinds of, it was really art and a lot of performances that were, and art and musical performances that were related to animals. So there was like a dog opera that was performed by dogs, and people were like encouraged to bring their dogs to watch the dog opera. Probably the centerpiece though was this performance called "Heard" by your own Nick Cave, which was amazing, like a really, really amazing performance. There was some people, like it was all, I don't know if you guys have seen this or aware of this, but it's there are all these horses, and they're all made, there are 2 people inside that horse. One's bent over and holding the waist of the other one. So the person in front is standing up straight, the person in the back is bent over, and there are all these dancers who, through the course of the piece, they start off all kind of doing their own thing, but they're doing all these horse movements and prancing around and doing different things. And then they, like, eventually they detach, and so then they're just wearing these like big, huge, fuzzy suits. and then they do a choreographed, like, you know, like really kind of like it's this really choreographed, like, you know, like they're standing in a grid performance to drums, and then they, you know, slowly come out of that and like reconnect, and then like, you know, leave the field. I mean, there were And there were like 20,000 people there to see this, which is just an amazing thing because to have that kind of audience for something like that, it was very cool. I was asked to design a barn for it, and I invited Paul Preisner to collaborate on this, and we decided to do 2 barns instead of 1. We used a prefab steel barn system, but 2 of them that were 16 feet by 16 feet. We made them square and plan, and positioned them at an odd angle. And then it housed, the barns housed an installation by a local artist of, well, so here's how they go together. Like when you receive them, they're just on these pallets, and they're just stacked panels. They're then bolted together into ribs, and then the ribs are assembled into the structure. So here's, and the assembly of them was, they're pre-painted. They were not pre-painted from the manufacturer, but they were delivered, and we had somebody paint them before we got on site. But then the barn raising itself was a kind of event that took place throughout that day, and it was all done by volunteers, and there were always people out there working on this. It was great. It was a fun day. I'll get to the installation in a minute. But so here are the 2 of them with the Ponte building in the background, which is one of the 2 halves of the Denver Art Museum. But here's the installation. These are all edible plants that were grown by by local artisans, and she also made these mats that go on either side so people would sit down and munch on these plants. Again, it was kind of a closer view of that. It turned out to be far more. I was like thinking there's no way people are gonna do this, and it was totally packed the whole night. So this is later on. You sort of tell this sort of strange composition of the 2 barns was probably the most interesting thing architecturally. So that's it. So that's basically outlining my participation in those 2 documents. So I don't know how you want to go through the questions, but I thought they were pretty interesting because they get to a lot of the background.